Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of Tech Can't Save Us podcast brought to you by Literal Humans. I'm joined today by Galen Wolfe-Pauly, co-founder of Tlon. Welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to talk about rethinking the future of the internet. And by way of introduction, Galen runs Tlon, a company that is radically reimagining what the internet could look like if it were rebuilt from the ground up. I know a lot of people would be interested in that because they're sick of the internet. They're just getting tired of it. Galen has spent more than a decade working on Tlon, which is a new computing stack designed around digital sovereignty, data ownership, and a simpler, more personal computing experience. Before Tlon, he led technical teams for consumer brands like Baggu,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
co-founded early experiments in digital infrastructure, and worked as a developer at agencies like Huge. With internet complexity, digital identity issues, and data ownership concerns only growing, Galen and the team believe that the next era of the internet won't come from another app, but from an entirely new foundation. That's bold. I like it. Welcome to the pod, Galen.
Thank you. I forget my own resume. It's funny. That stuff was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And the simple way to tell the story actually is that working in this earlier era of consumer focused apps and services with a mix of a kind of like a pretty technical background, but actually I also have like a design background. I studied architecture, and thinking about how do we build things that really serve the people that use them, I was very horrified by the fact that the only way to build great products is actually to own everything about the computing stack, right? You have to run the server, you have to control all of the user's data, you basically, control everything about it. And a lot of the stuff I worked on, while I think that stuff is interesting and cool, I was not super excited about, I mean, they're great products, great brands, but I felt like the underlying problem of how do we actually deliver software to people was much more compelling.
Can you just to follow up on that? You're getting to my later questions, but this is a great segue because it's starting with your journey and it's leading into what you've built. You said, how do we build things that really serve people use them? And you've come to the conclusion that you need to own everything about the computing stack in order to do that. Can you just explain to the audience why you found that to be the case, why you've come to that conclusion?
Yeah, I could be wrong about that, right? I probably really was biased, but so a lot of those things I worked on were actually before. I have a weird kind of meandering history where I worked for a long time before going back to school. So I grew up near Silicon Valley. I grew up building stuff on the early internet, and then went directly into building stuff at agencies and for some of these early consumer product brands. And then I went back to architecture school. And of course, architects have been thinking about how do we build things that accommodate culture, communities of all shapes and sizes for kind of as the long, it's like one of the longest running disciplines that's concerned with this. And in the discipline of architecture, if you think about like the tools that architects use to build things and then hand over to the people that use them, the architect doesn't own the thing, nor really does even the building can change hands, the land can change hands. It's owned by the community that depends on it. And if you think about the most most wonderful cities you've been in, the richest sort of religious buildings, they actually evolve over long periods of history, right? They kind of become a representation of a community and its history. And as we see information technology, communication technology, whatever, connected devices and computers of all shapes and forms become this indispensable part of human life, it just struck me that it's very much out of step with how we have evolved these systems for staying connected over the sort of longer arc of history. And if you also look at just the history of computers, I mean, it's really short, right? It's not that long. I was a kid, in the 90s on an internet that looks very different than the internet of today, and that's not that long ago. So it seemed to me that, just looking at it as an architect, it seemed like, well, you know what, look, like you could sort of throw it out and start over. It's not impossible.
Yeah, like I'd love to dig into like this idea that the internet, it's young, so I appreciate the humility in that sort of perspective. We all need to be more humble about how young this thing is that we're kind of building together. It's become increasingly centralized but also fragmented in other ways. I guess is an interesting way to think about it. Talk us through like the problems that you think are baked into the current infrastructure, and where do you see the biggest failures? Is it identity? Is it infrastructure? Is it privacy? Is it, the model of cloud services we rely on? Like, help paint the picture for our audience.
This is actually all of those things. Yeah, when we commute, like we coordinated to meet today, right? So we use identifiers across a bunch of different services that we don't actually own. So I email you, but my email address is not owned by me, it's owned by somebody else. We could have been messaging on a messaging platform that's owned my, even just the ID there, right? If for some reason that platform goes away, or even I lose my keys and I can never, there's no support channel for me to recover them, like that identity doesn't actually belong to me. Then of course all of the relevant data that, all the emails we exchanged, all the messages we exchanged, those things could easily disappear. That data could be mined for ads, as we're all very familiar with. They could be sold to someone else. We don't know what happens to it, but it's also not necessarily permanent. I won't necessarily be able to hand those things down to my grandkids. It's not a part of my family history. It really belongs to somebody else. That's all just a consequence of the fact that you have to have a server somewhere that runs the application in order for that application to be performant, reliable, and so on. It needs to be in a data center, right? We don't run our applications actually on our phones. Like our phone runs a little client app, but it has to connect to something else that lives somewhere else. And that's the really, sort of fundamental structural flaw of the way that the internet works. It's funny to frame it as like we want to rebuild the entire internet. Actually, that's totally my fault. So that was my original framing when we started working on this. But the reality is, you could think of it, the other way to think about it would be there's an opportunity to build better products that can last a long time, that can be infinitely modified by the people who own them, if we built a different platform where the user actually controlled the thing. They can run whatever software they like. They connect over a protocol. The entire thing is peer-to-peer, where everyone owns their identity. They own their own little node that can run whatever software they want. And I think the opportunity there is to build new products, basically. It's not necessarily to replace the things that we have. The internet is not going away. I think the companies that operate the centralized services, for all of the problems with them, they're doing the best that they can to deliver a good product experience with the technology that exists. My hypothesis is basically like, well, I think we could build better products, right, that are more customizable, that last a lot longer, that just feel higher quality. But you need a new platform for that.
And before we get into product, or we go too deep in that, I want to just stay back a little bit and, have you explain the concept of digital sovereignty and also this idea that there are trends that are pushing people towards this idea of digital sovereignty and self-hosted computing, and kind of what are those broader trends that are at play as you're explaining digital sovereignty as well?
Yeah, it's interesting because people do come at it from all of these different angles, right? So for some people, it's really compelled, like surveillance is really bothersome. Just the idea that someone could be looking over your shoulder, that can be, looking at your data, can be mining your data, and that can be all the way from you're an activist, you cannot be spied on, to it just makes you uncomfortable, right? So there are a lot of people who are interested in what we do for the sheer fact of they can self-host it, they can run it themselves, they can really understand the privacy implications of what they're doing, and potentially even customize like how their data is shared. There are some people who come at it from the standpoint of they just don't want to see an algorithmic feed. They don't want to see ads. They don't want to feel like their data is being mined for ads. And those are actually like totally different profiles. I think I tend to be most personally compelled by the longevity aspect. Like I just care a lot about archiving and the sort of quality of how everything I make is kind of cared for in the long term. I want to be able to keep things for a long time. So the prospect of being able to communicate with people on a platform that could last decades, many, hundreds of years, like could last a really, really long time, could last forever. That's quite compelling. And I think that's like, that's actually also a totally different profile. People who sort of think of themselves almost as these like digital preppers, right? Who feel like I don't feel at home on a giant platform. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a whole range of different profiles of people who care about sovereignty, and I guess a lot of those people actually come from sort of crypto like things as well, right? So people who think of digital ownership as really meaningful and are not just interested in the financial aspect, but are interested in how that can expand to include other parts of their computing. It's funny because basically the cross-section of people who are interested in what we do is so weird and varied in a way that I love, but it's really hard to pin down, even as the person who's been around this thing for a long time. Right. So it's kind of a hard question to answer concisely. Actually, it's like it's the weirdest and most interesting, thoughtful people in the world. I guess I don't know.
Products, the best concept, like they have strange bedfellows, and rightly so, right? Because you're bringing people together across lines of maybe what were perceived as like political or social difference, but you're actually like,
oh, for sure, yeah.
You're pulling like communities together around like a shared value, which is really, really fascinating.
one of the shared value might be that people take their digital lives kind of like seriously, right?
Yeah.
Like that they think of this stuff that it really actually matters, that
Yeah.
they're invested in it with a different level of sort of quality and attention than your average, I don't know, social media user.
Because there's a lot of cynicism that people just sort of assume like, oh, people will throw away their privacy for convenience, and people don't
Yeah.
care, and like I think it's easy to default to that and have like the lowest common denominator view of humanity, but that like there's more, there's much deeper stuff to that.
Yes,
So
it's also just not binary. This is something I think
right,
we've not been very good at explaining. So it's like I'm not I think short form video content in some cases is unbelievable. Like there is the TikTok, the sort of cinematic innovations of TikTok and Instagram Reels and so on can be insane, incredible, so interesting. It's a different kind of media. It actually I think it is valuable. But do I want to communicate with my closest friends and family there? Not really.
yeah,
That's not really what it's for. They're just different things.
yeah,
We sometimes talk about it like, if you wanted to host a dinner party, right, you wouldn't want to do it at a fast food restaurant. Like they're just different things. Like if you really want to connect with people, you want to feel like you're welcoming them to an environment that you can customize that represents you, you do that in a different place. You don't go to like Buffalo Wild Wings with your, with for Thanksgiving dinner or whatever.
yeah. Let's get into product. I mean, you're rethinking the computing stack from the ground up with Tlon. I want you to just tell us what it is and what makes it fundamentally different from traditional systems. And as you're doing that, please explain how you're approaching identity, data ownership, and communication in ways that kind of challenge the current infrastructure of the modern internet.
Yeah, so let's start concretely with the system this thing, like the system, the underlying system, and then we'll talk about the simple product that we build today. So the system itself is a network of nodes where every individual person has their own node that is a simple little virtual machine, which sounds kind of technical, but it's just a program that runs on top of any Linux machine with internet connection. So think of it just like a layer that runs on top of existing infrastructure. You can run it on any cloud server, you could run it on your laptop, you can run it on any phone, and you run this thing, it creates a network with all the other ones. To start it, you basically feed it an identity. You own that identity like you own Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever. It's a cryptographic asset, so it's actually yours. And that thing both can run computation and can store data. Like it has a very simple event log that's designed to last a really long time, where it has, every event is like a packet, a keyboard stroke, a file system event, whatever. And then, some of those events are remote events that move across the network. That's a little technical, but you can think of it as just like it's this little self-contained thing that's totally portable, right? So we'll run one for you in our infrastructure. If you someday decide that you don't trust us, no problem. You can download it, you can run it yourself. It's just a little sealed, hermetically sealed box that runs your computing, is your identity, and can belong to you as long as you like. Okay, great. What do you do with that, right? I mean, you could do a lot of things with it. You could use it for file sharing. You could use it for gaming. People built games on top of it. You could use it for all kinds of different, finance and trading applications, and people have experimented with these things. What we have been working on over the past couple of years, really, is to just build a very simple messenger, similar in a way to Signal, but probably a little bit closer to Telegram. So something that allows you to share multiple channels with different content types that you can customize among a bunch of peers. And so when you build a group on Tlon, which you can just install from the App Store, we spin up a node for you. You can invite your friends to it. It's honestly, I think, about as easy to use as Signal. All of those are actually independently running nodes that they actually could be running anywhere. So one of your friends can run his in his closet. Your other friend can run hers with us. It doesn't matter. They all connect to each other and transfer data around seamlessly and deliver push notifications to you, etc.
You kind of alluded to some of the use cases. I think you mentioned gaming, file sharing, trading. What are some of the other, and we talked about communities a little bit earlier, but talk us through like communities, applications, use cases that you're seeing kind of emerge most quickly on the network.
Yeah, so for, let's say, 3-4 years ago, as we were sort of starting to get the platform to the point that it was reasonably mature, people were experimenting with all of these different things. It's almost like hard to remember them. They're all super immature. You can think of it as kind of like, for those of you who are as ancient as I am, like it's like the floppy disk kind of shareware era of the internet, like just people inventing strange, unusual stuff and sharing it, all of which was super immature. There were a bunch of very strange and hilarious games that were all sort of peer-to-peer games. People have done a bunch of peer-to-peer sort of finance and trading stuff that all of which also, yeah, just super rough, strange, runs in a browser. You have to install it yourself. But what we had been doing pretty much throughout is that we run the company through it. We were building a chat and collaboration app here that we were running the company using, and everyone else was using that same app to coordinate about what they wanted to build. And so that's the thing that we sort of were like, you know what, I think this is where this is the most interesting thing, because unlike a Slack or a Discord, this is very richly customizable in a way that none of these things can be, meaning that every individual group can build plugins and extensions to their community and customize it however they see fit because they actually run the server.
Hmm.
So the possibility for us was like, oh, this could actually evolve into something that looks a lot more like a WeChat or a kind of like really extensible super app in a way that you can't find on any centralized platform because every node is actually a computer. So
Hmm.
that's the thing we kind of doubled down on and that we've been working on since. In its present iteration, yeah, it's really like a great place to start a reading group, bring your parish, or, start your small company, small community, bring your family. And that's what people are mostly using it for now.
Yeah, really interesting. I appreciate the flexibility and the pivot there. I remember reading about or hearing about the Slack story, how they were building like a
Yeah.
game, I think initially, and Slack was the
Yeah.
messaging platform as well. So sounds like you're on a similar, but hopefully it's the much more robust journey in terms of like what you're building there. To that point, would love to understand like kind of you're building a new platform, like a new way of thinking about using the internet and engaging, people engaging with each other. I'd love to dig into kind of like the big challenges and opportunities that you're seeing. Replacing that entrenched infrastructure is no small task. So, like, what do you think's been hardest about scaling, a system as ambitious as Tlon?
Well, the community of people who worked on this project, starting, yeah, about a decade ago, um, were in many ways simply naive enough to believe that it was possible to do what we are doing. And it's almost hard to list all of the difficulties in doing this thing, especially in the way that we did it, right? So we decided at first, hey, we just want to build it as a platform. Can you build, a fully peer-to-peer sort of standalone self-hosted computing platform that starts from, virtual machine, new programming language, new operating environment, with all of its relevant, basically kernel modules and protocols, such that you could actually run software on top of it. That is like an absolutely crazy thing to do, and the boldness of doing that actually attracts some legitimately crazy people and some very crazy and brilliant people. So one of the biggest challenges actually is sorting those two things out, and then I mean, getting a new overlay network protocol to work really well is extremely difficult. So getting it to work is one thing. I guess I would say this is actually the theme of this technical challenge would be getting these things to work. It's not actually that hard. Getting them to work really well and really robustly under many, many different conditions with that much technical surface area is quite difficult, especially when the network is small, right? So, hey, we've got a few thousand nodes on the network. Okay, sure. Do you see the variety of bugs or basically networking conditions that would create bugs in this new platform or would show off those bugs, right? Would
Mhm.
actually demonstrate what's broken about it such that you can fix it? Probably not. Can you build a test harness for it? Maybe. But actually, you need the thing to grow and get used to actually reveal, all the problems in a new networking protocol, a new file system, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I mean, it's like there's such an insane laundry list of hilariously difficult things that we worked through over that long period of time, just given the ambition of the project. It's
Yeah,
like we could
just
spend hours talking about that.
well, I mean, yeah, less on the technical side because I think you'll lose me, but I think like the growth stuff is really interesting because it feels like this might be the moment for y'all because we've got AI, we've got decentralization, cloud costs reshaping how people are thinking about computing and Web3, all that stuff, right, but blockchain and NFTs, all that stuff. Like, is this Tlon's moment? And if it is, like, what's the kind of growth strategy to kind of get you there and scale? And what are your growth ambitions? I guess.
Oh, that's a good question. I guess I've always felt like my sort of basic hypothesis is extremely high quality software doesn't exist. You have a lot of very mediocre software, but you don't have extremely kind of like luxury quality software. Meaning, if you think about the difference between, what you get from a true luxury good, right? What is the difference between like a Toyota and a Porsche? What's the difference between a Casio and a Rolex? It's really about like the craftsmanship that goes into the object. And that craftsmanship, I do think, is very much felt. It's felt in some cases in terms of the object's performance, but it's also felt just in terms of its sort of design quality, and what it can, what it feels like to use. My sense is that as we talked about earlier, like there's this huge cross section of people who do feel a sense of exhaustion using existing platforms as a means to communicate. And so I think that what we offer is the ability to do that in an environment that just feels really, really good, really, really refined, because it actually is under the hood, extremely carefully considered. And so it's basically like an extremely high quality way to stay connected, which otherwise doesn't really exist. And the highest level, without getting into this, like there are lots of ways to grow software, right? There are lots of different tactics on like how you might actually go get the thing distributed and get it to grow, and we'll iterate through many different ones. The high level strategy is really just like we are most differentiated in the care and quality that goes into the thing itself, and I expect that that is something that people will increasingly care about as they become exhausted by the existing model.
Yeah, that makes a lot of good sense. I mean, I do a couple trips out to San Francisco every year, and I purposely talk to founders who I think have really incredible products, and like I really focus on that. And one of them said to me, this year, just said, the best moat is people loving your product. And like it's
Yeah.
just I've mentioned it so many times in this podcast, like listeners are tired of hearing it, but like I just keep bringing it up again and again and again. And I love that dedication to your users and your audience, and the feedback that they're going to give you that's going to define your product roadmap. And as a marketer or growth strategist, I can say, yeah, like don't hire me if your product's great and it sells itself. Like by all means, I'm humble enough to admit that. You know what I mean? I wish more marketers were. So yeah, I mean, I think what you're doing and the approach that you're talking about is great, and it's timely. Like I think people are ready for some craftsmanship on the internet because there's so much crap. So crap being craftsmanship, I think is the next battle. Would love to hear a bit more about like your journey. I mean, you worked for consumer brands. You've got a couple co-founded projects under your belt. You studied architecture. You've got this really interesting background. I love people with backgrounds like yours. I think I kind of have one: educator and writer, and now agency owner. What's keeping you committed to a project like this? What are you bringing to a project like this when so many startups are focused on rapid iteration and getting all the users in no matter at whatever cost? Yeah, I'm just curious to hear about your journey and what's keeping you getting up in the morning for this, as we made you do for the podcast.
I definitely have no problem getting up in the morning for this. It's probably very simple. Like I just like working on it, And so I guess the craftsman answer would be like I actually enjoy the process of crafting the thing. I think that in order to really enjoy the process, you have to be aimed at something that either is almost unattainable or will outlive you. So one of the things that I think, Tlon can deliver, or already can promise that no one else can promise, right, is that we build something that could very well still exist even if we went away, right? So we built software where if the company disappears, you could still run it. It's easy to feel good about doing that, right? Like we deliver something to people that I think serves a genuine, it's actually genuinely useful, and it's actually genuinely yours if you want it. We'll run it for you, but you can take it at any time. That just makes for satisfying work, right? It's, kind of as simple as that. It's fun to work on. I like working on it, and I like feel good about what we deliver to people. I mean,
Yeah, I think I've been thinking about this idea. I mean, I love what you're saying there in terms of, in order to enjoy the process, you got to aim for something that's unattainable and will outlive you. And I think about this a lot in the sort of growth strategy marketing context, because there's so much hand holding. There's so much like, okay, you got to do this and this strategy, and we got to make this creative for you and stuff. And I've been toying with like, AI is moving into the marketing space, and it's eating our lunch, right? But what would it look like to give someone a tool where they could run their own strategy and execution, and it's got all the, a lot of the, knowledge in there? Now, that would cost a lot of people's jobs, right? And I think WPP's built their own version of this, like an AI planner and stuff like that. But like giving people things that they can, grow with some IP in it, but also something that's theirs as well. And I know a lot of agency owners are thinking about the SaaS, that they're going to build for their agency, but I think there's so much integrity to that, and humility, and as you say, it gives you a lot of purpose. So I really appreciate
it
that.
also just makes for great work, right? Like it's actually
Yeah.
just, you can then just really focus all of your attention on the thing in front of you. And I think that's what you want to wake up in the morning and do.
We're pushing towards the end here, but anything you want to share? What's on the roadmap for 2026 for Tlon and the team? What are you excited about? We love an announcement, on the pod that's an exclusive. Anything you want to shout out?
Well, the app itself is actually still invite only, and it has been for quite some time. And so we're almost at the point now where we'll start distributing those invites more quickly. So
Okay.
probably as of like the last couple of weeks, I think we got the last few features in, and we felt like, okay, this thing is pretty good. So I guess the main thing to announce is like, hey, this thing actually finally works reasonably well, and we're happy to start sharing it with the world. We've been making little invite codes for podcast and related. So we'll send you a link that you can share with people. If anyone is curious or interested and is having trouble getting on, you can easily, we'll give a way to reach out basically, and happy to have people start actually auditioning this thing in a much, simpler context than before. So for many, many years, this was like something you had to run yourself, something you had to be a little bit tactical to play with. And that is changing, which is, it's exciting.
Amazing, amazing. I'm going to run you through the quick fire questions. First thing that comes to mind, quick explanation why. I'm going to hold you to that. You're busy with Tlon, but if we're going to found another tech startup, what would it be?
I would not found another tech startup.
You're the second person today to decline that. I love that. Stay focused. Tech inventions. Which one makes you the most excited, and which one makes you the most concerned right now?
I think there's nothing I'm concerned about, but I'm definitely excited about the LLM as an invention. I mean, that's a massively important invention.
That's the typical answer we get these days.
Yeah.
And it's a good one. It's a really good one. Who's a literal human who's been integral to your journey? You want to shout out?
Probably Christopher Alexander.
And why is that? Quickly.
He's just like the most thoughtful architect of the 20th century, I guess.
Just that. No, it's a small inspiration. Does Christopher, anyone else have any inspirational quotes that have stuck with you on your journey you want to share?
Everyone should read the Luminous Ground. The final works are really fantastically good and easy to read, fun to read.
The Luminous Ground. I love a good recommendation there for reading. Well, listen, this has been a fantastic conversation, Galen. Thank you so much for getting up early and managing the various time zone snafus that we had to get this conversation going. Look, I think what you're doing is challenging, assumptions that most of us take for granted about the internet. And I think your work represents kind of a rare kind of long-term vision in tech. You're like rebuilding those foundational systems or reimagining them really, so the next generation can kind of own their identity, their data, and frankly, their digital lives. It's really impressive what you're doing. Can you tell folks where to find out more and get that invite code and where they can learn more about Tlon?
We can go to tlon.io, tlon.io, and we'll send you a code that you could just put in the show notes or something. It's probably easier that way. Yeah,
perfect. We'll put all that in the show notes. And look, you're really busy building the future of the internet, so we really, really appreciate your time. For our listeners, please give us a review and hopefully 5 stars so we can keep bringing great guests like Galen Wolfe-Pauly, the founder of Tlon, onto the pod. This has been another great episode of Tech Can't Save Us podcast brought to you by Literal Humans. And thanks again, Galen, for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Nice to chat.